Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Dan does Disney specifically. We've got our guest Tim over the Zoom. Hello, Tim.
Hi, everybody.
So we are going to review now Melody Time, the final of the big package films. There's still the Ichabod and Mr. Toad to do, but that only has two little features. This one is all out with the multiple shorts called Melody Time. Believe it or not, I actually don't have this on DVD, Tim.
Oh,
I thought I did, so thank goodness Disney Plus has it. I guess somehow I jumped over this when I started collecting all of the early '50s live action ones.
okay.
So, but there's only three little shorts as extras on the DVD. So I did end up watching those separately because I have a couple of those on my Disney Treasures collections and one I found on YouTube. So I pretty much got the whole DVD experience. Although I don't know if you read about the censoring.
I did read about that.
But yeah,
I was
but
interested in what your DVD had on it.
yeah. So I guess if I did own the DVD, the U.S. version of the DVD censors the Pecos Bill segment for the cigarette smoking, and I guess in turn, I mean, because that's the longest segment. We'll get to all the individual segments like we always do, but that segment's like 20 minutes long almost. And I guess narratively, because they didn't show him smoking, it cut out like a bunch of other things, so it doesn't make as much sense as the version you and I saw on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Which is completely intact. So, all right. So, starting off with sort of the history of the movie. So, this is basically the pop music version of Fantasia. Fantasia, of course, delved into the classic. And here we have Buddy Clark sort of doing the intros to each segment as opposed to Deems Taylor from Fantasia. But this takes a much quicker approach to it. Couple of words here or there, really just 30, 40 seconds between each one, whereas Deems Taylor kind of went on and on about the history of that particular classical piece and set it up that way. This was released in 1948, and again, kind of light on the budget, and it still made a little money, but not nearly as much as some of the other package films that Walt had done. 1.5 million it was the budget, and it got back about 2.5 million total. So a little bit of profit, but not nearly as much as Fun and Fancy Free or Make My Music. So obviously people were getting a little bit weary of the package films at this point. What was interesting about this was, though, the worldwide release took 6 years. It was released in the US and like some other places in 1948, and then in the UK as well in 1948, but then throughout the next 6 years, it was released in various countries in Europe. I don't know why. I couldn't find any reason for that.
Was it dubbing issues? Did they dub it, or was it the English version with subtitles? Or
Well, you know what? Maybe some of it could have been dubbing. That's true. I didn't think of that. Although, does that mean they didn't dub a lot of the other ones? Because the other ones they kind of released. I mean, Make My Music, I think, and what was the last one? Fun and Fancy Free, I think was released all at the same time, but maybe it wasn't released to all territories. Maybe that is why. I didn't think of that.
maybe.
So, like a lot of the Disney package films that we've already talked about, this was never re-released in full, but a lot of the shorts were broken up and either played on the Disney Anthology show on ABC, or some of them played in shorts in their own right, and a couple of them were actually released like with different things. Like, for example, the Bumblebee one was released in the '80s on TV with Dumbo. Dumbo is like the shortest of all the Disney movies, so I guess to pad out the time, they just kept releasing different things with it.
Makes sense.
We talked about that last week too, but and then I didn't know this when we were talking about Make My Music, but a repackaged film called Music Land came out in the early '50s, I guess, and that was a theatrical release with 9 segments total, 5 of them from this movie, 2 of them from Make My Music, and then 2 brand new ones called Two for the Road. And I'm not sure where to find those. They're probably on some of my Disney Treasures DVDs, I guess. But Benny Goodman, the conductor, produced those. So another way for Walt to kind of generate some extra cash, I guess.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And this was, like I said, the last of the real big Disney package films as, World War II was over. These were all sort of ways, as we've talked about, to kind of ease the coin from World War II. So Walt, after this, was like, okay, let's get back to actually like doing long form movies, fairy tales, and that kind of thing. So so they started doing that. But other than that, I mean, you're going to go over the segments one by one, as we always do. This was the last film we saw Jose Caracas and Donald in together until Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So they do appear in a segment. And our good friends, the Andrews sisters, are back for another number. But this is the last time they worked with Walt on this movie as well. So let's get to it. Let's talk about these segments one by one. You had mentioned when we talked the other day that you fell asleep during part of this movie. So I have a guess on which segment that was, but I guess we'll see. I don't. Was it because it was a boring segment, or you were just tired?
I think I was just tired, and I don't think many of the segments were all that engaging for some reason. Okay. I mean, they were all okay, I guess, but I didn't have one that was like, I don't know, really jumped out to me as a like edge of the seat type of short. So I think it was getting late, and I was just like,
Okay.
And I noticed that the last one was like 20-some minutes. I was like, I don't have 20-some minutes in me. So I went to bed and watched the last one.
Yeah, Pecos Bill is very long. In fact, I mean, most of them are either pretty long, like 10 plus minutes, or like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And we've sort of had that a little bit with, I guess it was Make My Music, but it wasn't quite that like long or short. It was either like they were about 15 minutes or like 4. This is like, this is like very long or like real quick. So, all right, so let's get into the segments.
Okay, so if Make My Music had kind of like a playbill type motif to get us through. This has our ever popular live paintbrush back again.
Walt was just killing this back in the day. Everything.
Yeah. So the live paintbrush comes up, and it first paints the stage and the curtains and some singing masks. And Buddy Clark, who does the narrations before each one, is singing the Melody Time song during the credits, and then there's a floating mask singing for the last part, and then the paintbrush paints the opening titles for each segment, and kind of like how Make My Music had like all like kind of like the credits for like who does it, like who's singing it and like or playing the piano or something like that. The paintbrush paints all that. So the first one is Once Upon a Winter Time, and that is a song by Francis Langford. And it's a story of two romantic young lovers on a winter day in the late, I guess, 1800s or something like that, who go on a sleigh ride and then go ice skating. The couple don't actually have any spoken dialogue throughout the short, and their story is also intertwined with a similar rabbit couple. The man tries to show off for his ice skating skills for the girl, and then winds up spraying her with snow, and she gets all upset. And she angrily walks off into an area that has thin ice. And a timely rescue is needed. Things I liked about it. I like that the heroes of the story were not the boy or the male rabbit. It was actually like the horses and like the birds and the squirrels that were also like minor characters on the short. I didn't see that coming. I thought like either the boy or the male rabbit were going to be the heroes.
Yeah, this short actually had a lot of depth to it. It's certainly one of the more interesting ones narratively of this whole movie.
The animation was not the best. It was very simple. But I think the simple of the animation was also somewhat endearing as well. But it wasn't anything that pushed the limits or anything that we haven't seen before.
No, it's definitely like minimalist type animation, but I do think it worked for the story. I mean, it's sort of like a nice, sweet love story.
Yeah.
But I did think it was weird that, like, because they don't have any dialogue, I guess I thought maybe the animation would be a little more interesting than it was.
Yeah.
But this actually was one of my favorite ones, at least top half for sure.
And it was also book ended with like a frame photo. I thought they did a good transition from the frame photo into the short, and then it ended with the frame photo and it closing. I thought that part, the bookends, were probably the best animation of it.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because once they got into the story, it was, minor animation, I would say at best.
Yeah, but I think I enjoyed this one probably in the top half as well.
Yeah.
And then we move on to Bumble Boogie. And that is Freddie Martin and his orchestra, and Jack Fina on piano. And this is an interpretation of Rimsky-Korsakov's famous Flight of the Bumblebee. And they kind of make it their own unique style. It's like a swing jazz type of number. And it features a bumblebee flying through and trying to survive a surrealistic and stylized world of music. And it's kind of remind me of the one that Benny Goodman did in Make My Music. I forget, it wasn't All the Cats Joined In, it was the other one he did. I forget what that one was called. But I thought this one did a better job of syncing up the action in the story that was going on with the music. Like, there was piano key pedals on the flowers, and some of them were horns, and they like blew in time with the music, and it kind of made more sense than the Benny Goodman one.
So the Benny Goodman one was After You've Gone, for Make My Music. That was, I mean, it was one of the throwaways, really. Let's be real. But this was actually, I think, my favorite one of all of them. First of all, it's even too short, I would say. I really wanted this to go on another couple of minutes. The animation was really cool. They were, trying some new things. I love how it went in time with the beat, and when he was like jumping on the piano keys and they were falling away. That was really cool. And just, I mean, Flight of the Bumblebee is such a classic, just like upbeat, fast tempoed type song that I think it lends itself to something interesting to look at like this.
Yeah, and like for all like kind of like the trippy things that Walt did through these short ones, like this one kind of all made sense in the world that they were doing. Like the piano keys were on the petals, flowers, and then they became like a giant caterpillar, and then became butterflies. It all kind of made sense in the world, where like the Donald one from Saludos Amigos, or no, Three Caballeros, it was just like trippy for trippy sake and didn't really make sense in the world. This all made sense that like, yeah, it's kind of trippy, but it was kind of just like a world that made sense though.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And this was originally sort of submitted for Fantasia, which is why it's musically sort of the one that sticks out a little bit, because this is definitely more of a classical piece than any of the other songs in here. But I'm sort of glad they kept it here, because I feel like if it went the Fantasia route, it would have been way too long, and then I would have gotten bored with it, like all the Fantasia bits.
Yeah, and I don't know if it would have been as compelling if it wasn't for the swing jazz interpretation of Flight of the Bumblebee. If it was the classical Flight of the Bumblebee, I don't know if it would have been as compelling.
Yeah, you're right. With like the sort of the hi-hat drum and the piano keys. Yeah, it definitely would have been a lot different if it was in Fantasia. So I'm glad they did it for this version.
And then we move on to Legend of Johnny Appleseed, which is one of the longer ones that we have. And it is Dennis Day, and he does all the voices. Only about 3 voices, 3 characters. He does the narrator, which is like I forget what they call him, like an old-timey person, and he does Johnny Appleseed, and then he also does Johnny Appleseed's guardian angel. So this is basically just a retelling of the Johnny Appleseed story, which is a real person. His name's John Chapman, and he's known for wearing a tin pot hat and apparently being very religious, and I did not know that part of Johnny Appleseed. And then also spreading apple seeds throughout, I guess, the East Coast and Midwest, like, or Mid-East areas, and getting more apple trees. And I don't know. From what I read, a lot of people like this one. I thought this one was way too long, and I didn't think it was all that compelling. I mean, I liked certain aspects of it. I thought the bits with the animals were interesting, and I liked the Lord is Good to Me song because I knew that song. Church, I didn't know all of it. I just knew the first part, but I was surprised about how much religious content Disney did have in this short.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes this really stand out against any of the other shorts that we've been watching in any of these movies, is that the religious just, I wouldn't even call them, overtones. I mean, it's very, very specifically religious. Walt doesn't really dabble, and Disney today doesn't even dabble in really that kind of stuff. So it was definitely interesting to see that. It's the second long one here. It's 17 minutes long. I think it's an okay story. We did the whole, was it 23andMe, or no, we did the other one. But apparently I'm a distant descendant of Johnny Appleseed, because my grandmother's maiden name was Chapman, so they somehow linked it back to good old John Chapman. So I should have been more interested in this, I suppose, but it was okay. I mean, we've all heard the story forever. We know the story. They added, obviously, the guardian angel type stuff into it. But, I think, like a lot of the Fantasia things, this was just too long. It didn't hold my interest for 17 full minutes.
And even though this one was shorter than the Pesco Bill one that we'll talk about at the end, this one felt longer. Yeah,
I would agree with that. And I'm not sure if that's because the Pecos Bill one at least had sort of a live action wraparound.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about. I don't know if that had something to do with it or not, but I think there's a lot more going on in Pecos Bill. Here, there really is only 2 characters, more or less, and then the narrator. And so to sort of drag that out for 17 minutes is, I think, a little long.
Yeah. And the thing, I did like the animation for how the clouds were kind of like apple blossoms, trees in heaven. I thought that animation was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I thought the rest of it was very simple, short.
Yeah, I agree.
And I did find it interesting that Chip the Chipmunk showed up again.
Yes. Okay. So I actually thought of you. I knew you were going to bring that up because you love spying Chip and Dale in various forms. So apparently the Johnny Appleseed short was popular enough on its own that it got re-released on Christmas Day in 1955, and then in 1956, Johnny Appleseed, the character, was a part of Chippendale Comics. They had like a little storyline in one of the comic books with Johnny Appleseed. So I guess this is just, I don't know. He's very entwined with Chippendale.
When did Chippendales first start?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked that, because one of the bonus cartoons on the DVD is Donald Applecore, which is obviously a takeoff of the Johnny Appleseed story, but with Chippendale being nuisances. And that was in 1952, and they got their very first cartoon in 51. So, I mean, this was only a few years before that. So I would definitely say these chipmunks that we've been seeing in the cartoons are Walt kind of had in mind. Let's see if audiences like them, and we'll give them their own book. You know,
just kind of testing the water, seeing if
I guess so. So yeah.
Okay. So that's Johnny Appleseed. Then we move on to Little Toot, and this is the Andrews Sisters' last song with Disney, and is the story of a little tugboat named Little Toot, and he wants to be like his father, Big Toot, but he just couldn't seem to stay out of trouble, and he causes a major disaster. He's trying to help out, but he winds up crashing a giant ship like really badly into the mainland. Like the whole ship is on the coastline.
It was quite the blunder.
Yeah, but for that, they banish him and they haul him off in chains, and they're like, "Get out of here, Little Toot." But then he finds the opportunity to grow up and be a hero, and he makes Big Toot proud. I did find it interesting that our friend Whitey the Seagull from the Whale short showed back up. They didn't say it was Whitey, but it was the same seagull. Yes.
Yeah.
I thought there was a clever animation where when he was banished, the lighthouse was spinning around, but the light beam would bend so it wouldn't even shine on Little Toot. But other than that, I thought this was pretty generic. It actually reminded me of the plane
the
one.
Airplane, right? Yeah.
However, I felt like the plane one was that plane Colin. I forget what his name was.
I forget. That was in Saludos Amigos, right?
Saludos Amigos. Was that Pedro's plane? I think it was Pedro.
Yeah. You didn't really like that, though.
I didn't like it, and because I didn't feel like there was any like consequences for his actions. He was just kind of goofing off, and then he almost died. But this one, he did goof off. He got banished, but then he grew up and he actually became a hero. I think that aspects of it made it slightly better than the Pedro one.
Okay. Why didn't I like this very much? I thought this was one of the worst ones, and I like the Andrews Sisters. They're Johnny Fedora and the Blue Bonnet song is like one of my favorites. I thought it was very derivative of the Little Plane. I guess story-wise, it probably makes narratively more sense than the Little Plane. Although I thought it was a little harsh that they just banished him completely. They weren't. I mean, it wasn't his fault. Like, he tried. It's not like
it was a little hard.
I mean, it was his fault, but like, right? Like,
yeah. I'm not saying that this was amazing. I just enjoyed this one slightly more than the plane one. But
I'm not sure why. I did like the plane one, yeah. So maybe that's why for me this was a little worse. And I don't know. The more I've thought about Alice Bluebonnet and Johnny Fedora, that's become one of my favorite segments of all of these. Right? Like in the moment, I thought it was very good, but then like as the weeks go on and we see all these other ones, I'm like, Man, that Johnny Fedora was a great bit. So this paled certainly in comparison to that.
Yeah.
And yeah, story wise, I just thought it was kind of derivative of the plane bit. So this is maybe my least favorite. Well, it might be my least favorite
one. I think Johnny Appleseed was my least favorite. It was just so long.
Johnny Appleseed was very long. You're right.
So we move on to Trees. And that is performed by, it's a song by Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians.
Yeah, I like that.
And it's a poem by Joyce Kilmer, I guess also called Trees. And there isn't a story here, really. It's really just a tree goes throughout the seasons. And even though there is no story, it's kind of like just showcasing great animation. There is some really good animation in this section. I thought one was like the sunrise in a raindrop. You see the sunrise and then pans back and you're just actually it's in a raindrop. Glistening spider webs. There's a shot of where it looks like the sky and then it pans out again and it's just actually the leaf blowing the wind. And I thought the scenes where the animals are in the storm and sheltering during the thunder or lightning, I thought that was really good animation as well.
Yeah, animation wise, this was really cool. I mean, it's that classic poem, I think that I shall never see something as so lovely as a tree or whatever. It's, based around that. And yeah, it sort of gives the trees and the plumage and all of that stuff personalities. I don't know. It sort of reminded me of like a 50-year precursor to Pixar almost. Like I could see them doing like a trees movie or whatever now. But yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty cool that there was no dialogue in it. There were no real, characters, I guess. The trees were kind of characters, but yeah, it just was kind of nice to look at. The narration was nice, and it was another one that's fairly short. It's only a few minutes.
Yeah, but I felt like at least there was a little bit of a story of it was like a tree going through the seasons, opposed to if we look at the Ingrats flying in the Everglades, like it was just two birds flying around. There was no story whatsoever.
Yeah, that's true.
And I thought this one was better done than that Dear John letter that was just weird animation.
Yeah, was that Make My Music?
That was Make My Music. That was one of the stinks in that one.
Yeah, I had some rough ones.
It was that was Without You, I think it was called.
Yeah,
but felt like this one was kind of similar, but they actually managed to have a story there, even though it was very thin of a story.
Yeah.
So then we move on to Blame It on the Samba.
Our friends are back.
Our friends are back, Donald and Jose Carioca. And this one's sung by the Dining Sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And then it features Ethel Smith on the organ. I didn't realize that Donald and Jose Carioca were in this one, so that was a pleasant surprise for me because I was like, I
think they had to show up somewhere because Disney Plus has them. Like when you click on Melody Time, it's Donald, and I was like, and he hadn't shown up yet, and I didn't think he was in Pecos Bill.
Yeah, well,
so I figured he had to be in.
I remember that Donald was like from that. I was like, oh, Donald's in it, but I didn't expect Jose Carioca.
Yeah.
But for me, the even bigger surprise was the Aracuna bird, because I love the Aracuna bird.
Why didn't they use him more, Tim?
I don't know, but they used the bird very well in this short. I thought the actual song where they were actually singing was really good, and basically the premise is both Donald and Jose are blue for some reason, very sad and actually physically blue. And Ari the Aracuna bird uses samba to cheer them up. Then we get the live action mixed with cartoons because we need that, of course.
Gotta do it. Walt always has to do it.
And this is where we have the organist come and play a song while Jose and Donald interact with her. When we get into the organ, I definitely lost a little bit of the short. I liked the song a lot better when it was actually singing. When it was just the organ, it kind of reminded me of the dancing cowgirl that was in that one trippy Donald one a little bit. But they did do a little bit of a clever interaction with Donald and the organist where Ari was hitting her on the knees and making her kick Donald. I thought that was clever.
I like when the organ fell apart and as she was playing, and then it, like, piece by piece, the animated version of the organ like came back together. I thought that was really cool.
That was really cool too. But this is definitely the trippiest of all the shorts. This one, and I felt like some of it worked and some of it didn't work. But I thought the song was probably the catchiest song of all the shorts besides Flight of the Bumblebee, because that's kind of well known.
Didn't you think also the hybrid with the live action was a lot better done than the last time we saw
it? It was
Jiminy
so much better than Fun and Fantasy Free for some reason.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but it was very, very well done compared to it was like, if you looked at Fun and Fantasy Free, that was like, it seemed like they did the last minute. It was like C+ work, and this is kind of like, oh, wow, okay, yeah. Like,
yeah, I thought it was so well done, as I mean, just in general, but especially when compared to the last thing we saw.
Yeah, and I don't understand why Fun and Fantasy Free was so bad compared to all the other ones. Kind of like reminded me of the first time we saw it in Three Caballeros, where the first time we saw it was kind of mixture of, some of it was kind of crisp and some of it wasn't, based off the different techniques they were using. But once they moved into the last bit of Three Caballeros, it was all crisp. So I thought they learned their lesson, but I don't know. I don't know what they did on Fantasy Free.
Yeah, I have no answer for that. I wish I knew, but it's some of the worst that we've seen so far. So I'm glad they course corrected with those.
Yeah, and I don't understand why, because the grainy part of Three Caballeros, it obviously was an actor in front of a green screen, but in Fun and Fantasy Free, they weren't in front of a green screen.
No, they were in the living room, and Jiminy Cricket came in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it, but this was definitely a huge step up from that. Yeah, this is definitely among my favorite bits. I don't think I hated the instrumental portion of the song as much as you disliked it, but this is probably my second favorite. I think it's concise enough that we don't get bored ever, and I think the visuals in it are really cool.
Yeah, I didn't like it as much. I just thought, like, there was a lot going on that I was really into it, and then I didn't feel the organist as much as the song when it was the singing.
Sort of dipped for you.
Yeah. But at least Ari the Aracuna bird was there to make me smile.
I know, I love that part. What a surprise.
So then we move on to the final segment. Ace Goes Bill. And this is sung by Roy Rogers and the Sons of the Pioneers.
Very famous person.
I know. I've heard of Roy Rogers.
Yeah.
Never heard of the Sons of the Pioneers. I didn't know.
Well, no, I didn't know them. But Roy Rogers and Trigger are pretty classic.
Yeah. So we have, and this is probably why it didn't feel as long as Johnny Appleseed, because it starts off with a song, Blue Shadows on the Trail. And this has some great animation as well of desert landscapes and shadows. I thought the animation here was really good. The song was a little slow. I think that was kind of putting me to sleep when it was late at night. But when I watched it the second time, I was like, okay. And then we go into a live action with Roy Rogers telling the story to our friend Luana Patton and Bobby Driscoll, who apparently also in Song of the South.
I was going to say, and they're in So Dear to My Heart as well.
So, yeah, which is coming up. Oh wait, was that? No, that's coming up next. That's supposed to be the next one.
I think Ichabod and Mr. Toad is next, isn't it?
Well, we're going to do that one next to finish up the
okay. But then go back and do the other ones. Okay.
Yeah. So Dear to My Heart was released after this.
And she's on the front cover of the DVD to So Dear to My Heart. So as soon as she came on the screen, I was like, okay, I know this chick.
Yeah. So they tell us the story of Pecos Bill, his horse Widowmaker, and Slewfoot. And they tell the story to explain to Luana why the coyotes howl at the moon. So we are introduced to Pecos Bill, and he basically fell off the wagon on the wagon train, and then he was raised by coyotes. And then when he was young, he rescued Widowmaker from a bunch of vultures, and then they became best friends. And then they tell how Pecos Bill did a whole bunch of unrealistic things, kind of like the tall tale aspects of like Paul Bunyan and stuff.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I knew of him. Like when I was a kid, I know the first time we played Oregon Trail, the card game, I was like, oh, I want to be Pecos Stan. And I don't think you had heard of who that was, but yeah, like Pecos Bill, I learned all about him in grade school, like with Paul Bunyan and I guess Johnny Appleseed and like all of these people.
Yeah, I'd never heard of Pecos Bill before, but apparently he roped and tamed a tornado. He ended the drought in Texas by lassoing a cloud from California and pulling it over, and then it rained so much it made the Gulf of Mexico. And they also explained how gold got into the hills by punching out the gold teeth from people, and he dug the Rio Grande with a stick. And
what a guy!
I know he shot out all the stars to make Texas the Lone Star State.
Yeah.
So that in mind, he did crazy, like outrageous things to do, and so an outrageous story is going to happen to explain how coyotes howl at the moon, and that involves him falling in love with Slewfoot Sue, and because of this, Widowmaker gets jealous of that relationship, and basically Bill falls in love and they get married, or they're going to get married, and on their wedding day, she wants to ride Widowmaker, and Widowmaker is a jerk and bounces her off, and then she bounces to the moon, and then Pecos Bill goes back into the wilderness, and he howls at the moon when he's sad, and because she's up there, but now all the coyotes do what he does because he was raised by coyotes.
Yep.
And it makes perfect sense.
What a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely far too long. 20 minutes, either I don't know. Either they could have gone the route of Fun and Fancy Free and made it a whole like half hour, 35-minute segment and fleshed it out more, or like added some songs in or whatever. But yeah, at the rate that it is, 20 minutes is a bit long.
But it didn't feel as long as Johnny Appleseed.
No, I suppose it's true.
You have a song in the beginning, then you have the live action interaction with Roy Rogers and the kids, and then you have the short, and then it goes back to Roy Rogers as a tail end. So I feel like the short itself is probably only, I don't know.
It's probably about the same length as Johnny Appleseed.
Probably
even though
shorter.
3 or 4 minutes.
Shorter.
Yeah, it is shorter.
But I feel like they probably could have trimmed a little bit in the beginning. I don't think you needed as much detail of him growing up in the wilderness.
Yeah, there was a lot of backstory on that.
There was a lot of backstory on that, and then they go through all like the tall tales of the tornado and stuff relatively quickly, and then get into the story. But I don't know. I thought this one was a lot better than Johnny Appleseed.
Okay. So Appleseed is by far your least favorite.
Yeah, it just didn't do anything for me. And I when it first started, I was like, oh, I think I remember watching this in elementary school. But then it got all religious. It was like, no, we didn't watch this. We must have watched a different Johnny Appleseed.
Huh. I might have. I went to Catholic school till 3rd grade. I might have actually watched it. I don't remember. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's looking at all of them. I guess Johnny Appleseed probably is my least. I don't know. I really didn't like Little Toot, but at least, like you said, Little Toot's only like 10 minutes, so at least you can move through it a little quicker. Maybe Johnny Appleseed probably is the worst one. I don't know.
And it wasn't the story of Johnny Appleseed. I liked the story of Johnny Appleseed. I just thought they spent way too much time there. I mean, yeah, they should have just cut off 5 to 7 minutes of it and made a 10-minute short, and then you could have had an 8th short in there, and maybe it would have been a winner, because most of these are not winners, in my opinion. I mean, they're not horrible. Like, I don't think any of these were as bad as some of like the Two Silhouettes one that from 2 movies ago.
But Two Silhouettes is like 3 minutes.
It was also only 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But like most of these were kind of on the average, with a few of them being slightly above average. Like, yeah, the Bumblebee one was really good, but I don't think it was nearly as good as some of like the A+ work from other ones. Like,
yeah, it's definitely not up to snuff with some of the best of the best. I mean, I would still probably, if we were grading them individually, I'd still probably give the Bumblebee like an A-. I mean,
I would give it an A-, but I feel like when you have Watercolors of Brazil being at A+ to make up for other ones, or Giant Fedora and Blue Bonnet, like that was plus. I mean, but then you also, with that, you have some classics. With that one, you had Peter and the Wolf, you had Casey at Bat, which were also like A- works. So like, just you have 1 A and
you're right. I think there's definitely
a bunch of B
in the C+, B- type of range. You're right.
Yeah,
I can't deny that. All right. Well, so the legacy of this film is that several of the characters were popular enough to sort of spin off into things. We talked already about Johnny Appleseed being in the Chip and Dale comic book. Little Toot had his own comic book in the 70s, even though he never was in another Disney thing again. Somehow he got his own comic book. And then Pecos Bill, I'm surprised you actually had never heard of him when we played Oregon Trail, because he has his own cafe at Frontierland in the Magic Kingdom. The Pecos Bill Tall Tale Cafe.
I guess maybe I just thought it was just a Texas name. I didn't realize that it was based off a character.
And did you know that they revitalized it live action? I didn't know this, and I never even knew this movie existed. But Tall Trees, the 1995 Patrick Swayze movie, is about Pecos Bill, and it was a Disney movie and all of that.
Guess we'll be watching the.
I guess eventually we'll be watching Tall Trees, starring Patrick Swayze. And then Pecos Bill even had a British comic strip in the 50s. So people loved this Pecos Bill character, apparently. So for some reason, this was one of the holdouts from Disney to the home media market. This was one of the last early Disney movies released in the U.S. It had one release in the 80s, and that was in Japan only on Laserdisc in 1987. The first time it appeared anywhere on VHS was in 1998, 50 years after its release. I guess probably for an anniversary they put it out. Sort of weird though, since it wasn't one of the ones that they ever re-released or even showed in full, like on the Disney ABC show or anything like that. So, and then if I were to have it, I guess I would have the 2000 DVD version, which was the Walt Disney Gold Collection. What I think is weird is it went 50 years without being released anywhere, and then they re-released it again 2 years later just to put it on DVD. Like I don't know the logic of that, but and that's the version we talked about earlier with the very heavily edited Pecos Bill bit.
The Pecos Bill, when he's riding and roping the tornado, he is smoking a cigarette.
Right.
So that sequence gets completely edited out.
But why not just draw? I mean, it's animation. Just draw over it and make him not have a cigarette. Like,
what I read is like there's other spots where like they kind of clip it out a little bit. Like the whole tornado riding thing, I think, is completely edited out.
Yeah.
But then like they clip it out a little bit, and then it just his movements kind of look weird at some sequences because he doesn't have a cigarette.
Okay. Yeah, like I guess if he's actively smoking the cigarette, you can't really edit out the cigarette if he's like going like this or something.
Yeah.
Or holding it.
But the one thing, because I did read about that, but one of the animators said that he was surprised that one of the gags in the Pecos Bills thing made it past the censors, and
that a very lewd like penis reference.
Yes,
the guns acting as when they're firing.
When he gets kissed by Slewfoot Sue, the guns rise and then they shoot off by themselves.
Right.
So somehow that made it through, but smoking, no.
Nope, can't do that. But once again, Jose still had his cigar even in the edited version. They still let Jose keep his cigar. I don't get that.
And that's the thing is, like, when we talked about the first one, Saludos Amigos, they edited out Goofy smoking his cigarette, but
Jose not so much.
Jose could have his cigar.
I'm not sure what the difference is. I'm not sure if they're making some sort of racial judgment there because he's from Mexico. But I mean, because I would say, oh, well, Pecos Bill is a human and Jose is, but Goofy's not a human. So that sort of throws that out the window.
I mean, maybe like cigars were so popular in Brazil that like they're like, well, this is about Brazil. We have to have the cigar in there. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's very odd. So even though I can't really grade the DVD on the whole, I did watch the 3 shorts that are the bonus features. One of them is the Donald Apple Core that I said about. So that's a Donald versus Chippendale bit on Johnny Appleseed. Then the other one is Lambert the Sheepish Lion, which is about sheep's sort of in a family, and then there's a lion that comes in and starts getting angry at them. But our friend Sterling Holloway does the narration and reprises his stork role from Dumbo in this.
Okay.
And then the other one, which I don't know why they didn't put this on Make My Music, is the Casey Bats Again short.
Oh.
And this is the one I had to find on YouTube because the other two are, the Donald one is readily available on like a bunch of different Donald Duck compilations. It's run on TV a bunch of times. Casey Bats Again is only available on this DVD. And so luckily somebody uploaded it to YouTube, so I was able to watch it. And actually I'll put in the description of this video, I'll put all 3 of the shorts. They are all available on YouTube.
Did it have Spanish subtitles?
It actually, none of the ones, I found them all on YouTube. Eventually I was like, let's just see. And they were all in English and I guess taken probably from the Disney treasure collections. But Casey Bats Again is really good. It's another, home run, no pun intended, I guess, for that. But he has a bunch of kids and he keeps hoping for a son to follow in his footsteps, but they keep cranking out girls, and eventually they have 9 girls, and he sees them in the kitchen doing dishes the one day, and they're like throwing the dishes and catching the towels and all this. So he's like, oh, well, I have 9 girls and now they're women. They could be their own baseball team. So it kind of follows along that whole thing. It's actually really good. You should check it out.
Okay. Was that just released as a regular short then, I guess?
Yeah, it was just a short. It was the other 2 I mentioned were from 1952, and this one was from 1954. So, but yeah, probably by that point, maybe they had re-released the original Casey one. I don't know. But yeah, so, but all right. So overall, I think this movie is probably a B-.
Yeah.
It's the worst of the ones I think we've seen so far. Even Victory Through Air Power at least was, I don't know, kind of riveting and interesting.
Yeah, I think it was also surprising is another thing of that.
Yeah.
That was surprising and riveting. You're like, oh, wow, okay. Where this, like, I think I expected this is the third of the, or how many? This is the
fifth overall. But
yeah,
if you
but
take
4
out the Donald ones, like if you take out 3 Caballeros and Saludos Amigos, it's the third of the like the music intensive shorts features. Yeah,
so
it's definitely.
I feel like that they should have had like kind of like their groove kind of in it, and I expect a little bit more A caliber work.
Yeah, I don't know if Walt maybe was getting lazy with it because he was like, oh, well, the other ones were successful. Maybe we don't have to try as hard. Or maybe they were gearing up now that the war was over to focus on making Cinderella and some of the other movies that had fallen by the wayside. I don't know. I'm not sure why this is such a dip in quality from the others. But, I mean, if I had to rank my top, like, 5 maybe shorts from all of them, I do think the Bumblebee would probably be in the top 5 of all the shorts but that's probably the only one. I mean, I think the Donald one would be in the top 10 for sure, probably not top 5.
Yeah.
So but then a lot of these would be in the bottom 5, so or
10. Yeah, but the thing is, like, there's probably some worse ones out there, but the ones that are worse were very short, where none of these were super short. Like, probably the shortest one was the Bumblebee one, which was the best one.
God, it's so good. Yeah, you're right, because like in Make My Music, it's like the bad ones are really only about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we move on. So yeah, I'm sort of glad that we're kind of getting to the end of these package ones. Like I said, we'll do Ichabod and Mr. Toad next, just because it is the final. I mean, it's more like the last one that it's only two shorts that are really like half hour a piece. But then we'll finally get back into doing full length features. With both animated and live action. We're ramping up the live action ones in the 50s, so we'll see. But yeah, that's it. Thanks again for joining us, Tim.
No problem.
And we'll do Ichabod and Mr. Toad next, and that'll be next week. I did get word. I got the mail confirmation from your friends at the U.S. Postal Service. I'm going to be getting Song of the South on Thursday, so we can definitely do that once we're done all the packages, and maybe rope Joe into that one as well. But yeah, that'll do it for this one. Thanks so much, and yeah, we'll see you next time. See ya.